an MD, and I have been teaching the MCAT for a little bit over 13 years. We are talking today about med school admissions and covering a little bit of the bio section. So med school admissions, MCAT questions, and a bit of content today from the MCAT Bio 1C section. Reach out to MCAT Boss for personal help on the exam. All right. Ask your admissions questions here. There we go. And perfect. Okay. Ask your admissions and MCAT questions here. All right. So, the next section we are talking about would be the Mendelian concepts like homozygosity and heterozygosity. Now, the section in genetics on wild type versus mutant is really, really, really basic, but it's a really good example of how the MCAT specifically takes a concept that's really, really simple and then can make it feel really complicated. So if somebody just asks you, like, what is a wild type? Then asking somebody about what a wild type is really, really basic. Asking somebody whether something is mutated sounds very basic. There are some sort of deep problems with the sort of evolutionary biology of whether something can truly be a wild type. But the primary way that the MCAT uses a topic like wild type usually comes down to something that you would not expect. It's kind of like if I told you, well, 10% of the 10% of the gene expression products were wild type. Well, or if I said 50% of the gene expression products were mutated, you kind of have this default built in that if 50% of the gene products are mutated, that means the other 50% are whatever we would consider wild type, which is usually just sort of the most common subtype of that particular gene expression product, right? So if I said, for example, that this one heat shock protein was being expressed in the mutant variety 65% of the time, it would imply that 35% of the time the wild type version of that peptide is being expressed. And the sort of background level with the MCAT is that if they tell you 65% of this is 65% of this protein is mutated, they're expecting you to know the background of the fact that the rest of it is wild type without them telling you that. And that sort of like inferred knowledge is the sort of biggest question mark for a lot of people, right? It's the thing that people aren't thinking about, because later when they get the problem wrong and they read it and the answer explanation says clearly 35% of this was wild type, people are like, hey, how was I supposed to know that? So next question. So thank you guys. We've got a few questions popping up here. One says, during undergrad, thank you guys for smashing the like button. We're only going to be on probably 10 or 15 minutes. And then I will follow up with everybody who has emailed today from the lives today. Just make sure you drop me a line. And let me also, I will answer your questions right now. And I will just, let me just leave this up here that you can email Dr. Matt, and it's really simple. It's just Matt at MCATBoss, Matt at MCATBoss.com, or you can visit the website. All right, questions. First one says, during undergrad, how were you able to retain information for all your classes? So I mean, I think studying and doing practice problems is really important. I'll be completely honest. I had to do a lot of practice problems to score close to 100th percentile on the MCAT. I had to do a lot of practice problems to land the kind of score that I did. So I still advise this for everybody. Even the kids who come in with like a 4.0 from Harvard who come to work with me, I still tell them to do like 3,000 to 4,000 practice problems. And that's how I help people get such high scores on the MCAT. That and understanding sort of the background level, understanding how the MCAT is written, I think is a really big deal. Lakshmi says, can you get into med school with suspension? You still can in some cases. It really depends on what the suspension was for and how you address it. Like if you were suspended for something that is considered like a remediable offense, then yeah, if it was for like something like somebody cheated on an exam and then lied about it or something, there's kind of a threshold for a lot of schools where something like that will be harder to explain away, and that it depends. I don't know. Over the past decade plus of doing this, I've encountered dozens and dozens of very different scenarios, and I think it's a little bit hard to generalize from that to sort of a general rule about how that is treated by the med school. So welcome in, guys, on the YouTube side. Okay, back to questions on the TikTok side. Jackson says, is taking a gap year to study for the MCAT and to stay near family a good excuse for interviews? Okay, Jackson, the sort of short answer / long answer. The short answer is that a lot of people do it, and as long as it converts to a high score for you, then you'll figure out a way to explain it. Don't even worry about it. I personally do not think that a gap year is considered a bad thing anymore. I don't think it is. I think a lot of people who kind of did MCAT advising in like the 1990s had this very big emphasis on like never doing a gap year. And I don't think it's a big deal anymore. Now, I myself had like more than a gap year. I was a career changer. I was a mathematician before, and I changed careers and pivoted, and it was totally fine. Zazapu says, is med school content conceptually more difficult than Orgo or other undergrad? It is not. No, the conceptual difficulty of medical school topics it's the same body and the same chemistry and the same processes. You just have to learn a whole bunch more about it. It's not any harder. There's just a lot of it to learn in a very short amount of time. If you can picture a stacked sort of academic quarter or semester, and then imagine having your entire academic semester in an undergrad science, but then having your final exams every like 6 to 8 weeks or something like that, and then all of them being comprehensive. Next one is Luigi says, would you consider a career changer with the same stats to be more career changer versus someone fresh out of school? I guess that's a hard question to answer because they really come with two really different sort of sets of circumstances. And I'll break it down in the most practical way that I can. A person who is applying, let's just make up a number. Somebody has a 3.9 GPA and a 515 MCAT, super, super admissible. And the other person has a 3.9 GPA and a 515 MCAT. They're both applying to med school. One of them is applying in their junior / senior year of college so that they can essentially go straight through to med school. And the other person is a career changer and has been out of college for like half a decade or a decade. Now, the school is going to know that the person who is coming fresh out of school is traditionally sort of prepared for book learning, right? They're ready to have their pre-clinical curriculum, and they're going to be fine. The person who figured out how to get a 515 MCAT, who's been out of school and is working a full-time job, that person is going to have the experience of having been away from traditional classrooms, possibly longer, unless they went back for classes. And then they're going to have the experience of having real life pressures and work and schedule, and also figuring out how to do really well on, such a hard exam. And they're going to know that the person who has, oftentimes the person who has been out of school for a while has had other circumstances that have been challenging that they've overcome. They are going to know that they have learned to interact really well with people, that they have negotiated challenging situations, that oftentimes they've faced challenging situations themselves. There really is a level of sort of comfort and experience that comes with being a non-traditional and applying to med school. So I think that if you're dealing with going straight through, you're already in the scenario that most students are in, so you don't have anything to explain away. Even if you are on the less experienced side, that is okay. If you are coming in as a non-traditional, I think that you really should play up the benefits of the additional life experience that you have had, whether that's a couple years on the job and dealing with challenging circumstances at work, or balancing a harder schedule, or if that's something more extensive, if you have had a more extensive career. I think it's helpful to really emphasize the added value that brings for you. And I think that's really important. All right. Let me check the questions on the YouTube side for a second. And on the TikTok side, we have a very general question. I want to be a doctor. Well, it's welcome in. If you want to be a doctor, it's a long journey. Starts with your if you're in the U.S. side, it starts with getting through the prerequisites in college, keeping a good GPA, and getting ready for the MCAT. And if you are in the European system, do your best in high school, because the entrance exam, the general entrance exam is much easier than the specialty sort of science knowledge and applied stuff that you have for the MCAT for med school on the US side. All right. Okay. Last time on the content side, we left off on why to become a doctor. You might have to clarify what your question is there. We left off last time on the content side, talking about recessiveness, complete dominance, codominance, incomplete dominance, and hybridization, and the gene pool. And then the next section would be meiosis and other factors affecting genetic variability. This includes the important differences between meiosis and mitosis, the segregation of genes, independent assortment, linkage, recombination, and more, right? Mutations and genetic drift. There is some crossing over phenomenon, chromosomal crossovers that are discussed on the MCAT as well. Oh, analytic methods. Yeah. So the MCAT does cover the Hardy-Weinberg principle. So you are going to have to make some very, very basic calculations about allele frequency. You're not going to have to get into the level where you would with something like an actual population genetics class, but you do have some material that is sort of at a population level, like telling you that there's a 5% frequency of a particular recessive allele, and then figuring out what the, say, distribution of a heterozygous genotype would be. They talk a little bit about test crosses and gene mapping and statistical methods. Let me do a real quick screenshot here. All right, so here is the list of all the sort of Evo bio topics that, let's see. Let me adjust this one. It's already July. It is July. Somebody says, is it too late to apply? And we have a question about non-traditional. So let me handle one of these at a time. The first one, is it too late to apply? And I want to say, you know what? I would say, Matt, I would say, I would say go for it. I think that it's obviously not ideal to apply in July, but a 507 is not a terrible score. 3.9 is obviously a super strong GPA. Unique extracurriculars sounds interesting. Yeah, I would say go for it. Drop me a line, matt@mcatboss.com, if you need somebody to look through your your application or your essays, because they're definitely, you definitely want to have a very waterproof story to tell and a unique narrative. But yeah, I think it's better to apply in July than August or September. And exactly. See, I actually agree. Why is it too late if it spans May through September? So I think the general idea, and we'll talk about, I got to do a real quick clip on this in just a second, but I think the general idea that it is, that you have to study, you have to have applied by, you have to have applied by June or something is probably a little bit too extreme, a little bit too restrictive. So I say more power to you. I say go for it. I do think the reason why they have a lot of, the reason why they have it open that long, I think comes more from the, I want to say, I think it comes more from the fact that people add to their application than anything. So more people are in some cases taking additional rounds of the exam, or they're doing other, they're tracking down letters, they're doing other things to really add to their application packet, and that's why it stays open to September. It's not honestly intended. I don't think it's intended to just be a way for people to just apply at any point during the time. But I do think people put a little too much emphasis on applying early rather than applying strong. So that is my take on it. Let's see. What Luigi says, what MCAT score are you more likely to get into med school than not? So that would be the whole like crossing the 50% line, and it depends on the GPA, right? So for some people, getting above a 50% means like scoring above a 517 because they're working with a lower GPA. For some people, scoring something like a 514 might be above a 50% because they're dealing with a really high GPA. So it's up to the combination. Okay, let me do a real quick recorded rant here for 1 second. There are a few topics in evolutionary biology that you are expected to know on the MCAT. This is that list. You need to understand natural selection, the concept of fitness, which is not how fit an animal is, but how likely it is to be successful at reproducing future generations. Selection by differential reproduction. That means that natural selection just amplifies certain traits more than others. Concept specifically by that offspring being more successful at reproducing. That is the concept of fitness. The difference between sort of natural selection and group selection. Evolutionary success as an increase in percentage representation in the gene pool of the next generation. This is the most zoomed in view that basically says you don't talk about the success of an individual, you talk about the success of an allele. If allele A goes from being 10% of the population to being 90% of the population, that distribution from 10% of the gene pool into 90% of the gene pool, that is a more successful gene variant. That's what we mean when we talk about evolutionary success of a particular gene variant. Speciation, of course, is the idea that as the population splits out, the more successful unique traits in one location will be more successful, and in another trait, different ones will be more successful until they stop reproducing and start forming separate species. And there's a few related concepts here, including inbreeding, outbreeding, and bottlenecks. And evolutionary time is measured by gradual random changes in the genome. This is the idea that as mutations are slowly introduced, there's this sort of genetic drift that happens over time. These are the evolutionary bio topics on the bio section of the MCAT. All right, guys, we're going to wrap it up there. Let me take a real quick look at the couple of remaining questions here. All right, very last one says, Matt Smith says, one of my unique extracurricular six-figure business helping people leave. Cool. Yeah, getting into growing coffee and stuff. That is super cool. All right, guys, if I can help you out, I'll leave the text up for one more second here. So this is the site, mcatboss.com. If you need help, reach out, matt@mcatboss.com, or just visit the site, mcatboss.com, and I will go ahead and get back to everybody as soon as we wrap up here, and I will see you guys next time.